every leader on their growth journey has a huge amount to learn still. And they have blind spots, just like you and I and everybody else has a blind spot. So I missed out on working on growing the leader as a leader and growing the team as a team, making it clear that in order for the business to grow at a certain rate, the leadership team needs to grow ahead of that.
Welcome to Tip Top Grow Up Your Business with Metronomics. Join me, Shannon Byrne Susko, and Metronomics certified coach, Jed Roberts.
We'll be talking to business thought leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business team coaches who have all taken the journey to grow up their businesses to their tip top.
We'll be sharing strategies, systems, stories, on how you can grow your company up at the speed you want.
If you're searching for your path to the tip top and feel your time is running out, then this podcast is for you.
Okay, well, welcome back to another episode of Tip Top Grow Your Business with Metronomics. I'm your host, Shannon Susko, and today we're diving into the world of business transformation and strategic execution, one of my favorite subjects. And we're diving in with a guest who knows how to take organizations from good to great and so far beyond. Paul Kelly's with me. Paul's a coach, a consultant, founder of Mylyn. For over 35 years, Paul has worked as a strategist, a coach, and a consultant, as well as a trusted advisor to purpose-driven leaders who seek consistently making breakthroughs in their thinking, planning, and performance. I've known Paul for, I was thinking about this, Paul, maybe more than a decade. We met one another.
Yeah, I think it was 12, 13 years ago, Shannon, for sure.
12, 13 years ago. Wow. Well, and I was instantly attracted to Paul's expertise in strategy. Paul and I are definitely strategy gurus. We love strategy. And we met in a coaching organization looking and learning and connecting about how we can do things better. Paul, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yep.
And
I'm really here.
And I know you've avoided this for a long time. I gotta, tell the listeners, I think I've invited you every year for as many years as I've done a podcast. And finally, I have Paul on the show, and I'm excited about that. And I think, Paul, we should start with your sort of personal and professional journey, where you started. Can you share a little bit about how you got started, why, and then I want you to add in, you have founded Mylyn, which is your latest organization, and talk a little bit about that.
Okay, how far back do you want me to go, Shannon? Because when I saw your question coming up when we had a brief conversation about this, I realized I was looking at things in decades rather than years. So I can go back very far. But if I think of my work that I'm doing now, working as a coach and consultant, that actually happened addressing something that you always bring up about people. What was your biggest failure? So my work came out of one of my biggest business failures, where I'd started a business as a 25-year-old. I left a very secure, pensionable job for family reasons to set up a business. That didn't go very well. It was in the 80s. Interest rates went to over 20%. I was in a business I knew nothing about and didn't work out very well. But I ended up doing a course in a government agency on marketing and sales, a 6-month program intended mainly for school leavers or people unemployed. And 6 months into that process, I was given an interview with an organization where I thought it was a job. It was actually a piece of research which I took on, 6 days research. I put about 10 or 15 days into it, gave the results and some recommendations to people, and they said, "Hey, can we hire you to do some more work for us?" So I kicked off my consulting career with a Fortune 200 company based on 6 days market research. So it all started off in that way in Dublin, Ireland, for a firm that was headquartered, Fortune 200 company based in Stamford, Connecticut.
Love it. I love it. And so many times things that we do, lead us on our serendipitous journey. How did you go from, how did you go from that to where you are today, co-founding Mylyn, strategy coach, and working with the team you're working with?
Okay, so what happened in that was it was a fractional role. They wanted to set up a business in Europe, and they needed someone to go and meet potential customers, find potential customers, liaise with their team in the US, because they had no operation in Europe in this particular area of business. So I was working maybe 8-9 days a month for this organization, essentially looking for business for them. And in that context, some people saw what I was doing and asked, could I do the same thing for them in smaller businesses? So this was a business with tens of thousands of employees across the world. So by osmosis and referrals, I ended up doing work for companies that were startups or 10, 15 million looking to export out of Ireland. And that essentially was a marketing and sales consultant. And that went on for about 7 or 8 years. And I ended up winning clients in Ireland and in the US simply just by doing the work I was doing and getting referrals.
Amazing. How, that's where you started. Today, who are your main clients? Who do you coach today? And how do you approach that with all the experience you've had over, and you joked about, do I tell the story in decades or whatever? It's amazing the experience you have. Who do you serve today? Who do you want to make an impact with today?
Well, I think that's the really important question. Who do I want to make an impact with? And within a year, I was working with a multinational organization that was globally known, Irish startups, and also doing some work with not-for-profits. And still today, it's exactly the same profile. So right now, we've got clients. One of our clients where we're using Metronomics, for example, has 800 million in revenue, is a component of a global organization. And we're also working with startups with less than 10 million in revenue. And we're working for a not-for-profit. So we apply our principles, our strategy principles, rolling in Metronomics into that with an eclectic mix of clients from as far west as California and right across. We were in Warsaw last week working with a client. So we've a global reach of clients, and they're from startups to global organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's been incredible, and it's been really attractive as I've got to know you over the years, is your reach into these global organizations, the leaders who are involved with them. And that's why I wanted to ask about the who. Who do you want to make an impact with? And when we think about Mylyn today, tell us a little bit about that organization, why you founded it, and what's that all about? What's the passion for Mylyn today?
Yeah, well, I'll have to ask my boss, because in the last 6 months, my youngest daughter has taken over that business. And actually, it's a fairly unique experience. So for the first time in 30 years, I have a boss. And unfortunately, she's a much better trained manager and runner of a business than I am. So that's the first thing I think the world needs to know, that to see me behaving differently is because I have a boss. But what we're here to do is essentially what we're all about is bringing out the best in people and organizations. And that digs into my DNA in the sense that I trained originally as a teacher of physical education, environmental studies. And that was what got me going in my career, was that. And I've also always been a sports coach. I coached my first adult team when I was 22. So the thing that drives us is, look, we are called on by organizations to have a strong sense of purpose. And what we're about is working with the CEO and the leadership team in bringing out the best in those people and their organization. And we do think of it as an entire organization, not just the leaders and not just the organization making profits, but the impact on the environment, the impact on the people who are employed in it, and the impact on their customers.
Yeah, can you share an example of one of your clients, companies, teams where you've can talk about that remarkable transformation, the impact of your work? Are you able to share maybe a little case study of one of the clients you've worked with?
Well, maybe if I think of two in parallel, because right now we're working with a company which was set up by an executive in a medical devices company who had been in that business for 20 years. And because of change in that organization, he was made redundant about 7 or 8 years ago. And he approached me and said, look, I want to start a consulting business. I really have this deep commitment to the industry. And it was based on personal drive because 2 or 3 members of his family were people who would benefit from medical devices, and it was his core area of expertise. So we've been with him now for 7 or 8 years, navigating the journey from a startup. Recently, they went through the 1 million a month revenue, dropping about 25% to the bottom line, and they're going to grow 30% again next year. And, their purpose is making lives better. And that's a genuine purpose to have in the business. And it's been a real, for example, in your case, Shannon, for Metronomics, it's a classic example of the Metronomics journey. The people who are now leading the team is a completely different team than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So they're gradually layering in more experienced people with greater expertise at the same time as growing the younger people who join the organization who are being promoted on a regular basis into new roles. And that's one of the things that we love to see in an organization, is that ability to grow your own organization, build up your talent portfolio, constantly revise your strategy, and grow the business. So that's one example where it's certainly a purpose-driven organization and they're making a real difference.
Yeah, amazing. I love those stories. And when we think about, we talk about leaders, and we talk, about the importance of focus for leaders. Within your practice, within your, the using Metronomics and the growth operating system, how do you help teams identify, that's one thing, and stick to their true priorities? What's the methodology that you use? And we know that when we're working with different size companies, it really doesn't matter. It's all about getting leaders to focus. Can you give us a little feedback around how do you get, leaders to stick to their, I'd say true priorities, but the things they have to get done?
Well, as you can imagine, spending so much of my free time coaching sports teams, amateur and professional, and leaders in coaching teams, that attention to detail, that discipline is super, super important. And remarkably, a lot of teams and businesses which do grow, maybe not as well as they could grow, are not as disciplined as they might be. And therefore, that's one of the major challenges, both in leadership teams at a lower level in terms of revenue, but also at very large organizations. So we regularly come across teams that are put together to run a particular division. And when you actually look at how that team is performing, their discipline is not very the way it should be. So there's 2 things here. First of all, it's the appropriate tools to support the transparency. And one of the great strengths of the Metronomics process and your metronome growth systems is the metronome growth systems. And we find the rigor of having your daily, weekly, and monthly meetings, having structure on those, having visibility and transparency of people's priorities, and then the regular rhythm and holding people to account, getting into that discipline as a team rather than doing it just through a CEO is a really super way of getting all this done. And that applies to whether it's a sports team. The transparency is super important. And then the other thing is creating the psychological safety where it's okay for someone in a more junior position to call truth to power in respect of keeping the priorities.
Yeah, I love that. And when, a lot of people think priorities are the strategy, there are things we need to do to execute the strategy. What are some of the common mistakes that you see leaders making when trying to achieve strategic clarity? There's things we need to do. And, sometimes, when we start working with a client, they were over on the right side, where really strategic clarity was over on the left side, and we need to move them that way. What are some of the common mistakes you see in leaders making when trying to achieve strategic clarity?
Well, first of all, I don't think an awful lot of people really understand what strategy is all about and the difference between strategy and setting goals and setting targets. So getting a really good strategic thinking and planning process in place is absolutely fundamental. There are some people who are naturally strategic, who immediately an opportunity or a challenge comes up, can look out in 3-5 years ahead of time, imagine what might be possible, and then build some goals around how you might achieve that. But in a typical organization, what's really required is a really good process. And I love the overall Metronomics process. And I was just thinking of this recently, Shannon. You're working in identifying differentiators. How all that works is a super process. And in fact, it's very close to the process that I was first introduced to when I realized that the work I was doing in marketing and sales development sometimes wasn't appropriate. What I mean by that is, by coincidence, 3 clients at the same time around 1990 asked me to take on project briefs, which when I thought about it, did not make sense for the business.
Right.
Because I didn't think they were going to deliver long-term success. They were more like initiatives. So we're going to get them into a new country or launch a new product, but they lacked a genuine strategic intent as far as I was concerned. So I engaged with a man called Clive Redding, who had written a book. He'd worked for Arthur Young, Ernst & Young, Philip Morris, had written a book. I read the book and I said, this is what strategy is all about. I contacted him and he became my mentor for about 5 years.
I love that. I didn't know that story. That's awesome.
Yeah, and in fact, I must share, I have a copy of the book. I've 2 left actually, one for me, and I'm going to give it to you because his philosophy of a distinctive capability matches very closely to your differentiators.
Love
and that's
it.
looking into the future. Where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years' time? And then what are what is required to get you there? What do you need to, how do you need to differentiate? And that process is very close to your differentiating process. So to sum up, the real thing is about bringing people through a process, whereas a collective, to get a better understanding of what an amazing future might look like. You call it the BHAG, stepping into something more short term, and then figure out what are the 3 or 4 things you need to become amazing at, not tasks, not goals, but capabilities, which end up giving you a result you want.
Yeah, no, I love all of that because, one of the things that, I struggled with in the beginning as well was just all the strategic pieces that we were learning were so narrowly focused on a product or service and not wide enough to see the company in the marketplace, in the market space, actually, and trying to find not only, a one-off tool, but a process, knowing that strategy is this ongoing process, not a one and done. And I think that's what really frustrated me in the 90s, actually, and just trying to find that process. And I know when we first met, I think part of our synergies was around strategy and just trying to figure out a better way to do company strategy, overall company strategy. When we think about strategy, I know the other piece that you've done a lot of work with, I know Mylyn has done some good work with this, and a recent time is thinking about how to build a high-performing team. Because we know if we don't have the right who, it's really hard to validate, create, build up and validate a strategy. So when thinking about that, what's the approach that you've taken in order to help leadership teams truly develop the trust and alignment required to, I'm going to say, perform, execute the strategy, but most importantly, even before that, to, create the strategy?
Well, what's interesting is you're beginning to say what you were saying about when we met and our interest in strategy. I didn't share this with you before. I can't remember where we first met, but I know it was a very warm location. You were giving a piece on strategy. I think you did it outdoors with a flip chart, and I saw there were 5 or 6 or 7 options. And in my little arrogant head, I said, "Well, I don't need to go to the strategy one. That's what I do all day." But then I said, "Actually, I'm more interested in strategy than anything else, and I'm bound to learn something because I'd heard of your success in growing 2 business and doing the exit." I said, "Well, here's an executor of strategy. I'm going to go and listen. And I went along, and there were a couple of things. First of all, your straight talking, how clear it was, and your use of pictures. That really got me, because in the work we do, flip charts and diagrams and drawings are a really effective way of communicating and causing arguments, etc. And so I just wanted to mention that. But the other thing was, you mentioned about the process of strategy. When I go back to the Clive Redding thing, his book is almost like a 1990s version of what you did, because it talks about the process of developing strategy, the psychology, and a critical thing in the first chapter is building the top team. And in the strategy process we used at that time, the introductory workshop was 2.5 days. The first half day was working with the leadership team. And in advance of that, everyone completed a Belbin team profile. So we went into a room, and our first piece was getting a team dynamic going, understanding their differences, and making sure they were brought into the strategic thinking and planning process. So this really was music to my ears at the time, because I was a sports coach. I studied psychology of sport, and I began to realize that in all Clive's experience, he said, Paul, we're wasting our time taking people through a process if the team is not cohesive, if it's not challenging each other, if they're not able to have disagreements, if they're not able to make commitments. So if you like, it's fundamental to the way we do our work. Getting back to your question, we complete an assessment of where the team is at the time in all situations. Right now we use Strengths Finder and Predictive Index. In fact, one of the reasons for setting up Mylyn was to bring a greater emphasis on strengths into our work, because we've profiled 1,000 people on strengths. So the first principle is making sure people's awareness grows. So that's the foundation. The 5 dysfunctions of a team, to get the people talking about what they need to improve, and recognizing very often they're not as good a team as they think they are, but also showing them that it's possible to improve, because a lot of people think they're good teams and in fact they're not. So to sum up, we complete an assessment, we get people aligned, facing the reality where they are today, and make that an intentional part of growing the business.
Right. And I love that, because, I think, I learned this the hard way around ensuring our leaders had the self-awareness required to actually, as a team, have team awareness of where we are in regards to, working together and whatnot. And then, having that consistent time, not just once a year off-site, but consistent time over, day, week, month, quarter, of how we're going to continuously grow our cohesiveness. It's one of probably the hardest things to explain. And I also think it is one of the things that we miss along the way, because we're so, when we work with clients, they're so focused on they know they don't have a strategy, but they're not sure why they don't have a strategy yet, right? And part of it is just sharing the awareness overall of the team of where they are cohesively. Can you what is the name of the book, of Clive Redding's book?
It's called Strategic Business Planning, A Framework for Success, and it's probably out of print. And he used to always joke to me that the only people that bought it were his friends and family. But I do have an original copy for you.
Amazing. I wanted to say that out loud, because, as we grow with strategy, and as, the audience is listening in and they're growing with strategy too for their business, just as we grow in every other area, we have to grow our strategic process, our mindset. And I got made fun of many times for going, back to, thought leaders from the 60s and the 70s. But, strategy is so foundational in, the process, that it's well worth it. And I think what we have brought to it, and I know the work that you're doing, is making it into that system, an ongoing system for leaders.
The fact that you've constructed what you call the house, in your diagram, which I even though it's mesmerizing, when it's properly explained, it's a super way of getting a really full understanding. And in yours, one of the foundational things is obviously the CEO and the whole culture. In Clive's book, he's a pyramid in the way he shapes the strategy. And on top of that is purpose. So from the very beginning, we're digging into that. And his early part of the framework is understanding the culture as it is today and deciding, if you want to deliver the strategy, what does the culture need to be developed into? So the intentional work that you do on the hard and the soft edge is a core part of any good strategy, and it's a big missing gap in a lot of strategies.
Yeah. And, I think that was one of our key connections, thinking about high performing teams, thinking about strategy in a wider sense. Can you share, and maybe I'm going to ask for more than one, but give us some of the big lessons learned when you think about working with the different teams, and it can be recent or maybe there's some bigger ones from early on. When you think about what should every high growth leader be thinking about when they're looking to, really drive to where they want to end up? What's one of the, one or two big lessons you've learned along the way?
This is a lesson for me more than the leaders, because I would have enjoyed imposter syndrome at a high level for the first 10 years of my work. When I met an entrepreneur or a business that was already going well, and somehow I was referred in to work with them, I felt they knew an awful lot more about everything than I did. And I made an assumption that the leaders were, in inverted commas, good leaders. What I didn't realize, and I suppose Marshall Goldsmith sums all this up, what got you here will not get you there. So if I met a leader who was running a 25 million business that it founded, I was in my mind assuming this is a great leader. I now have to work really hard to help and develop a strategy, etc. What I was missing out was that every leader on their growth journey has a huge amount to learn still. And they have blind spots, just like you and I and
Yes.
everybody else has a blind spot. So I missed out on working on growing the leader as a leader and growing the team as a team, making it clear that in order for the business to grow at a certain rate, the leadership team needs to grow ahead of that. So sometimes I neglected that work, which is actually one of my core strengths, because I didn't see myself in the early days at all as a coach. I was in helping them do the task of winning business in the US or helping a US business enter into the Irish market. I didn't see myself as coaching the people. And it wasn't until someone asked me to do what I did for another client, can you coach me and my team to grow this business? It changed my thinking. I realized the consulting days were over, and it was more about coaching, even in consulting projects.
Yeah, I love that. And can you talk a little bit more, because I'm thinking about the leaders who are listening in and thinking about their own journey. When we talk about, the leaders' growth journey and then the team, a leadership team's growth journey, can you talk a little bit about what are the similarities, what are the differences, and what should people be thinking about when they're thinking about their own journey and their journey as part of a team?
I think one of the things that comes to me is that having people identify the fact that no matter how effective they are as individuals or a team, they're certainly going to have lots of blind spots. And figuring out a way to work together or with stakeholders and understanding what the blind spots are and where they need to improve so they can identify incremental steps they can make to become more aware. Sometimes the blind spots are in their own markets. Sometimes the blind spots are how the team operates. Sometimes they're interpersonal things. So identifying and getting third-party input into how they're doing, customer surveys in the case if it's a market issue. But as a team, making sure that they're working very hard to understand each other's ways of working, getting feedback from each other and fellow employees, I find can be a transformational. It's also something that many leaders avoid because they're not ready to get direct feedback.
Yes.
And
I
I'm sure you might do this as well. Very often, we leave an empty chair at meeting room tables, or maybe two. One we mark as a chair which is for an employee down the organization. Another can be
Yes.
for a customer. And then we go and sit in that chair and do a role play, saying what we think the customer might be saying or what an employee might be saying. And with permission, giving them direct feedback on where we see the blind spots.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely do that with my clients and within my teams. We would have those empty seats. And I think you've been even in our boardroom at Metronomics, and we have our mannequins who have their customer names on them and the coach names on them. And we have a lot of fun with that. But it's just the reminder of opening up that feedback loop and listening to things we may or may not want to hear. But the blind spot remover is so, so important. I love that you bring that forward. When we think about currently, current business landscape, there's lots of things going on out there globally. There's lots of things going on in the markets that our clients are playing. Are there any particular trends or challenges you see emerging today when you think about, the companies you're working with, or, you work with companies in global markets. So I'm interested to know what challenges or trends you're seeing today.
Well, obviously, one of the trends which has accelerated since COVID is the whole remote and hybrid working piece. And some organizations are finding that incredibly difficult to manage. And we have actually one client which was even before COVID, it was 100% virtual. And even in that company, which has grown and developed very, very well, it's constantly developing ways and means of developing the level of cohesion and connection. That is a challenge. And it requires a change of mindset, a change of behavior, a change of structure in order to make that happen. So it's an area we're very interested in and have developed methodologies for doing that. And some companies, the issues are really at the leadership level, but particularly if there's a significant age gap between the leadership team and the people they're hiring. So some people are just not able to handle that. So that's an area where we've been working to help clients understand how they can develop a new way of working in order that it can be very effective in that environment. And then the other one, obviously, again, at the moment is the whole development of AI, which is accelerating. And, TipTop, the presentations there were absolutely super. And it is an area where some of our clients are really jumping into this and going after it very aggressively. In fact, if I look at the evolution of one of our clients in the last year, they now have they've now appointed one person as the lead for AI digitization. And it's intended to become a differentiator in this particular industry. And they're going to invest in that significant investment in the next 12 to 18 months. So that whole area is important.
I love both of those trends because, I would say with the clients I'm working with we're thinking about our markets around the world. I mean, if we're not talking about AI, we have to be figuring out how AI and strategy work together. And we have to be thinking about how do we create connectedness amongst our leaders and teams while they're working in this hybrid environment. And when you were telling that, talking about the hybrid environment, I'm thinking about when you, became and started out the Metronomics journey to become a coach. It was one where it was during COVID, and it was a very difficult way to train coaches, through a total 100% virtual 2-day training. How awful was that? Over Zoom, and we had people from all over the world, training, and everybody was so willing, to figure it out, even though it was, I can think of that. We had to think about how to do it differently. Was that a great experience. Not in the beginning. Has it got better? Absolutely. But we're all definitely learning, and it still comes back to our human connectedness, right? There's no doubt about it.
And it's interesting. It's interesting, Shannon. For us, it was a challenge and a blessing when COVID happened. The day that the President of the United States said that we're going to close down flights back to Europe, I was in New York facilitating a workshop with 40 people from a client organization, 12 or 13 who'd just come back from Madrid where COVID was rampant, and the rest of them from different parts of the world. And we flew home the next day and then went straight into lockdown. And for me, this was a really dramatic change because workshops are what we do. And we are, we've a deep expertise in appreciative inquiry. We've run workshops with 400 people in the room, and the energy and the dynamic and the transformation can happen in that kind of environment. But we had to flip over to, luckily, we'd already been working in Mural to a limited extent, and we were able to move seamlessly into working in the Mural environment, running workshops with 30, 40 people. At the same time, we still have not got to the magical place where a workshop on Mural is anything like getting people into a room. And anyone who pretends that obviously had never really had a good workshop in person. But still you get a lot of stuff done, but it just isn't the same.
No, it's just not the same. The connection's not the same. The interaction's not the same. Do we walk away with, having moved the needle? For sure, right? And, it's nice that we can do a hybrid environment, but it is fantastic that we have the opportunity and we're back in person with clients. And really, when we think of ourselves as coaches, we're part of the team as well, right? We are that blind spot remover who's part of the team. When you think of, CEOs who are just starting their Metronomics journey, right? And we're starting out with them. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a CEO who's just starting out on the Metronomics journey?
The first piece of advice is I would give the advice to myself, and that is to make sure that the preparation of the CEO, that we walk beside them, helping them understand what the process is really all about, what the steps are, and how that's going to flow. Just because we've been through it with dozens of clients doesn't mean that they're going to understand and appreciate the value of the early steps in particular. So I think for me, that is a critical piece, is really engaging with the person, talking them through it and making sure they understand it, because they're going to be stepping into situations where they will feel quite vulnerable because some of the steps we're taking. So I think that's the really important thing. The other thing is making sure that the CEO you're speaking to is someone you really want to work with for the next 3 to 5 years. That they genuinely have a growth mindset, that they want to learn, and that they're willing to be vulnerable, and that they, in my case, that they fundamentally believe that the people around them have the potential to grow and improve, because that's one of our core principles. We believe anyone we meet has more potential in them, more ambition than they can see at the moment, and they'll always find an energy once they've got the right leadership. So I think that's actually more important than anything else. And then with the leader is giving them the space to ask loads of questions, finding ways to understand what their fears are. Because, the leaders, I don't know in your case, but in my case, they fall into 2 broad categories. It's either someone who's got an amazing opportunity coming down the tracks and they're not sure how to handle this. They really believe in some product or service and they know they should be, and they're saying, am I the right person to do this? Or else they've hit a wall and they're struggling and they've got fears around whatever's going to happen. So they need to be in a really safe space with the coach. I think that's the first step in the journey.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic, because it comes back to when we're starting out on this Metronomics journey, it comes back to that the mindset of the CEO, right, at the end of the day? And are they open, willing, and want to evolve, right? And we're definitely there as the guide to that for where they're starting out. And I know the clients that I took on a couple of new clients this year, they are, in that category of had incredible growth to get to this point, and they know they need a system in order to support the next, chapter of growth that they are looking at. But I loved how real they were about their own individual growth to keep up with the growth of the organization.
And there's another question, Shannon, that we ask always is, who are we working for here? Especially if they're founders and they're the major shareholder. Are we here to work for the CEO, or are we here to work for the future of the business? And they're fundamentally different, because regularly our CEOs are very skilled, very expert in one particular area. And maybe the area that they're not skilled enough in and can't develop skills in is leading a business through doubling in revenues over the next 3 to 5 years. And I would say twice out of every 5 times our CEOs end up stepping to one side to allow someone else to lead the growth of the business, and they move into a specialist role around innovation, or to become a board member in order that the business can deliver its full potential. To me, it's important for them, and it's important for us that we can actually ask the question later on when it gets to the point where the CEO is now at the point where the CEO would not hire himself to run the business, or herself.
What's next for Mylyn? And what are you most excited about in the work you're doing?
We're excited about, there seems to be a pattern at the moment of clients buying and selling. So one of our clients, a very large business, is just being spun off from a very large organization. And just today, by coincidence, we've been asked to work with the acquirer and the client organization to build the greater organization, to expand that and bring the way we're working into that organization. So it's the challenge of growing businesses, bringing two businesses together, developing a new, unique culture for growing that. So that's a piece that we love in terms of the practicalities. And then another client of ours, who will be at the next Tip Top, is an Irish company in the food business. They're purchasing a business in Germany, and we're being brought in to bring the Metronomics to that new organization. A separate, but what's interesting is they're not merging, they're not acquiring each other in that sense. They're going to run parallel businesses, both with their own unique cultures and growing the business. But the piece that's really interesting for me, separate from that, is seeing the next generation of people like Nisha and others who are going to grow the business, living the same values and principles we had. So I'm going to move on to being a coach of coaches, taking on less work and doing a podcast every 5 years.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you mentioned Tip Top, right? And we're doing one in Dublin, right, on February the 19th. And we're excited. This is our second time we've been in Dublin. We're doing a full day Metronomics Workshop, partnered up with Mylyn, and we're super excited to welcome both existing Metronomics clients and, of course, new clients.
Yeah. We're delighted to have Finance Fair, the funding company, joining in doing that. And at least this time we've got good notice, Shannon, because the last time you just said you were coming over to see your daughter competing in a world championship, and we organised it in about
like
2 or
6
3 weeks. Yeah, at least this time there's a runway. The last time was more like getting the plane off an aircraft carrier. This time we got a good runway.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about that. Always excited to go to Dublin. And excited to actually bring Metronomics to many more leaders, many more businesses. And the last time we were there, it was an incredible day of, learning from Metronomics clients who are already implementing, as well as new who have, learned a little bit along the way. Now, here's a question for you. If you could distill your experience into one guiding principle for leaders, thinking about all the different leaders you've worked with, all the different, I think strategy, leadership work you've done, what would it be?
Keep finding another question.
Wow, that's good. That's good. Keep finding another question, because at the end of the day, a lot of people ask, oh, you're a coach, right? What does that entail? And I usually say, look, it's about asking the right question at the right time. And I think back to my own coach of the day in my first company and my second company. I think that's really uncanny. Came back and said to me, Shannon, yeah, I need to grow you into a coach to ask that next question.
And what's interesting, just by coincidence, I called today with, I'm now at the stage where my clients are retiring and I'm still hanging out. And this guy I worked with for 25 years, from when he was a junior, an engineer in a company, becoming a plant manager, and eventually was running a division for a global organization. And one of the big steps he took was moving to the point where this guy was very, very bright, very good communicator. And when he learned to be the last person to speak in conversations, ask questions, and find a question which brought out the best in the people and their thinking, his leadership really grew, because he was bringing out the best in his people and meant they were thriving and growing. That helped the business grow.
That is amazing advice, actually, to wrap this all up and wrap it together, because I think that's probably why I was so attracted to your experience and expertise over a decade ago, because of your willingness and your humbleness to listen and then provide or ask the tough questions. If I remember, always the tough questions. It makes us think, it makes us reflect, and brings awareness to what we're doing and who we are, which is a really incredible strength you bring to the table. Now, if listeners want to learn more about Mylyn and your work, where can they go?
So the website that Mylyn has, and their website tends to be up to date, mine is 10 years out of date, is mylyn.net, mylyn.net. And my own website, which people should go to if they want to see a 1960s website, is paul@paulokelley.com. And so that's where you'll find me. And I'm also on LinkedIn, and happy to hear from people. Whether it's a coach thinking about becoming a Metronomics coach, or a leader stepping into coaching, or someone that just would like to talk about doing some work, we're very happy to talk to anybody.
Love it.
It's a nice location around the world. That's how I choose my clients now. So South America is waiting for. I'm waiting for a call from South America.
Yeah. All right. So if listeners are in from South America, give Paul a call. He'll definitely show up. I have a similar theme to where my clients are in the world as well. Love the exploration, the curiosity of new cultures and places, and of course, making an impact in those companies. Paul, right. I want to thank you so much for being here, number one, for sharing your insights, your experiences. I could probably talk to you for most of the day. But I'm really always impressed and humbled by your commitment to helping teams and leaders and organizations thrive. So I just want to say thank you. I know the listeners took a lot of good advice away today. If you want to learn more about Mylyn, Paul O'Kelly, check out the show notes. Until next time, keep working on your business. And remember, great things happen when your team's in sync. Thanks for tuning in to Tip Top and grow your business with Metronomics.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Tip Top is brought to you by Metronomics.
To find out more about Metronomics and how this proven 20-year-old system will save you time and money as you grow up your business,
visit metronomics.com. That is metronomics.com.
Share your thoughts on today's episode in the comments and suggest topics you'd love us to explore the next time.
Also search for Metronomics in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else that great podcasts are found.